Hi, guys. This week you're going to be doing a writing on an article that you choose about colonial America. As you may have seen in the short story this week, the story took place back in the 1700s, and in our country, that was part of our country's history known as colonial times. So I have chosen some articles for you to read. When you go into ReadWorks, you will need to find the set of articles titled Life in Colonial America. You may have to go onto the second page to find them. So if you look down here at the bottom, if you go to next, it'll take you to the next page. But on my computer, it's on the first page. In the set of articles, you will find all of these articles about colonial America. You get to decide which article you read and then respond to. I have chosen Sickness and Cures in Colonial America to model for you a race writing based on this article. So, this article, Sickness and Cures in Colonial America, is the only article that you cannot choose because I am doing this as an example for you. So, what you're going to do is, again, you're going to choose one article. You're going to read the article all the way through. The articles are fairly short. If you look at this one, it's only several paragraphs long. Once you read the article, up here on your page, you will go to Book of Knowledge. It also can be found down here at the bottom of the article. So if you get to the bottom, you can just click here. Or if you're up here, you can click that box to go to the Book of Knowledge. Now, when you get to your Book of Knowledge, it is going to be blank here. And this is where you're going to write a race response to the question up here at the top. If you notice, it's not really a question, it's more of a direction as to write two or three things that you learned. But knowing what you know about race writing, I want you to respond to this just like it were a race writing written response. So, again, I'm going to model for you how I would respond to this by using race writing. Now, if you remember, in race writing, the R stands for restating the question. In this case, it says, please write two to three things you have learned from the article that you want to remember. So, I started my writing off like this, and this is my R. It also is my A. So let me read it to you. It says, in the article, I learned that people did many unusual things when sickness occurred during colonial times. So going back to the article, Sickness and Cures in Colonial America, the whole idea of this article, which I'm not going to read to you, but I will tell you the idea of it. As the title mentions, the whole idea of this article is that it tells you some really unusual things that people did back in colonial times when they got sick. Doctors did not really exist back then because they really were not being educated to be doctors. So anyone who claimed to be a doctor really hadn't had much schooling, if any at all. And so they would come up with these crazy concoctions to give you if you were sick. So that is really the whole idea of the article. So, again, going back to my response, in the article, I learned that people did many unusual things when sickness occurred during colonial times. So I have given you the R and I have given you the A. I've given you the A or the answer to the question without giving you all the details. Now I'm going to go in or back to the text and give you details that I'm going to cite from the article. And when I cite my evidence from the article, I am going to start at the beginning of the article and work my way down to the bottom so that it shows up in sequential order. If it's easier for you, up here on the right-hand side is this little box here. If you click on that, then your writing will show up on this side, and the article will show up on this side. That way you can make it easy to go in and do your writing. So I'm going to go back to this view so it's easier for you to read. So once I get into citing my evidence, I've already told you that many unusual things occurred back then. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you specifics about what actually was done to cure sickness. It says in paragraph 2, there's my citation, the author said that people use different herbs and plants to make their own medicine. Back in the day, there were no such things as pharmacies or drugstores, so most people came up with their own solutions. They even used tree roots and tree bark to make medicine. So that's my one citation and my explanation. So if I'm thinking about race again, my first sentence is my R and my A. And what I just read to you, starting from here all the way down to here, was I began with a citation. I wanted to find a piece of evidence that showed you something that was unusual. And I think using plants and herbs and tree bark is definitely unusual if you think about making medicine out of it. And then, so I cited the evidence and then I explained to you in more detail why it was unusual and what they did. Okay. So then I'm going to go on to my second citation. So starting here, I said later in the story, the author mentioned making a tea concoction using a roasted toad. Can you imagine? This apparently was the cure for tiredness. Now that is unusual. So again, now I have taken another piece of evidence from the text, given you a little bit of information using my own words, not the author's, and again, tying it back to explaining to you how unusual that is. The last citation, I started with this transition finally. It's always a good transition to use toward the end of your writing. And here's my last citation and explanation. Finally, toward the end of the article, the author described a very common procedure that was supposed to cure almost anything. This procedure was called bleeding the patient. After a small cut on the arm, the patient would bleed until all the sickness was drained out from their body. All better. As you can see, okay, that was the end of my third citation. And then finally, at the end of my article, I put a couple concluding sentences to wrap it up and not just come to a abrupt end. So at the end, I wrote, as you can see, the ideas and remedies for sickness were quite unusual many years ago. I'm sure glad I'm alive today. So that's how I wrapped up my story. And then down here at the bottom, once you're done, you will submit it. Now, the last thing I want to show you is what we as teachers see on our end. So after I submitted my writing, I went back to my side of the ReadWorks, and it gives me this little document to show. First of all, it'll give all of my students' names. And then it'll show me which article you chose. So if I go down here, I'm sorry, it'll tell you the number of words that you read. So in this article, it says, and I'm using Dylan as an example, it told me that Dylan, in that article about reading the cures in colonial times, was 350 words, 58 words long. And then over in this column, it tells me words written. So how many words did you write in your response? So when I did this example for you, I wrote 140 word race response. I used 3 citations and 3 explanations and then a final concluding sentence. So it really was quite a bit of detail that I included. I would say that if you do a well-written response, a race response to this, you should be anywhere between 125 and maybe 150 words. Now, do I expect you to count how many words you have in your article? No, but if you look back at mine again, you'll have an idea. If you look at how long I wrote, I have to scroll down, but not far. This is 140 words, a well-written response. So, again, go back and decide which article you want to read. You cannot choose the one I did for you, but you have plenty of other options. Once you have written your response, go ahead and hit submit, and hope you have a good week.